And I'm back. Excuse me. I am back. I have returned. I really didn't go anywhere, but that's what you usually say. As we've talked about many, many times since the orange bastard was thrown out of the presidency, the criminal acts that he has committed against the United States, the unconstitutional acts, the unethical, all of it. It's piece by piece starting to surface, which should make it easier to convict this son of a bitch. Remember, honesty, truthfulness, and adherence to the Constitution means that 17 Republicans are going to have to somehow rise above their Christian fascism. I don't know if they're going to be able to do this. Off the top of my head, I doubt it. That would be a third of the Senate a third of the Republican caucus of the Senate is going to have to honor their oath. And I don't know that they'll be able to do it. I really don't. In fact, I think that they won't. But that's what it's going to take to convict this son of a bitch. But as we move towards the trial, which I believe begins in about 2 weeks, more and more of his criminal activity is surfacing. For example, Deborah Birx, as you know, she was the Orange Bastard's coronavirus response coordinator. I guess that was her official term. But Deborah Birx provided the Orange Bastard with numbers, hard numbers, math, in an attempt to guide the fight against this pandemic. But all along, she now says Trump was receiving different statistics from people who were not interested in solving the issues around the pandemic, were not interested in saving human lives. The people providing Trump numbers were only interested in sucking up to this orange bastard. On yesterday's Face the Nation on CBS television, she said, quote, "Someone out there or someone inside was creating a parallel set of data and graphics that were shown to the president. I know what I sent up, and I know what was in his hands was different." End quote. Now, all along, during Deborah Birx's tenure, I kept making the point that I didn't trust her, which is not to say that I thought she inherently was a liar, like the orange bastard and everybody else who worked around him, but that she did not have the courage or respect for her oath of office or respect for her oath regarding medicine to stand up to Trump, or at least go to the public and say, this man is twisting what I'm telling him. This man is ignoring what I'm telling him. This man is causing unneeded tens of thousands of deaths because of the pandemic. She didn't do that. And this idea that so many of these senior officials had, or said they had, well, it was better to stay in the Trump administration and try to fight this son of a bitch from the inside rather than being on the outside and having someone worse appointed. To me, that's horseshit. I don't buy that at all. If every single person who had worked for the Trump administration, the senior people, the people that, like General Mattis, people that made some kind of sense, had some sense of logic or basic honor, if those people had spoken out at the very beginning, rather than cruising along until they got out and then writing a goddamn book, things might have been different. But that's not what happened, and Birx is one of those people. Apparently, she sat down for a rather lengthy interview with Margaret Brennan, the host of Face the Nation. And it was her first formal interview since leaving her role advising this orange son of a bitch. And in that interview, Birx told Margaret Brennan that she, Birx, her word, always considered quitting her job, during which, while she was at that job, she alternately drew criticism from other scientists, and on the other hand, from Trump, and from people in the middle, podcasters like, Malloy. Anyway, she said that she will probably retire from her job at the CDC after, in a number of weeks after helping the Biden administration with its transition. I would be very leery of her help at this point. Now, she was a well-regarded researcher where it concerned HIV/AIDS during that pandemic that is still ongoing. Are you aware of how many people have died of AIDS since the early 1980s globally? I think it's approaching 100 million. Anyway, she was selected by Mike Pence last February to serve as his so-called right arm. I've heard right-hand man or right-hand woman, but okay. And her job was to lead the Orange Bastards' chaotic response to the pandemic. Now, I know that doesn't sound exactly like what she was supposed to do. She was supposed to lead the way out of the chaos that the Trump bastard was causing. But according to the Washington Post, even after she arrived at the White House and briefed Trump on the growing threat to the country, Birx said he continued receiving and passing on, her words, quote, a parallel data stream coming into the White House that were not transparently utilized. I saw the president presenting graphs that I never made, end quote. And I could add, or I should add, presenting them as if Deborah Birx had made them, which she had not. Birx added that she believed at least some of the data had been funneled along by that horrible son of a bitch who also should be put on trial for being accessory to mass death, Scott Atlas, who was then a White House coronavirus advisor. The people around Trump were they're the filthiest of the filth. It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Scott Atlas was rebuked for playing down the pandemic and all the other shit that he said. And this is a freak that had no infectious disease or public health background whatsoever. Nothing. What was he, a radiologist or something? And he was the one that advocated doing nothing, which is exactly what Trump finally wound up doing. Let herd immunity take over, or as Trump called it, herd mentality, dumb son of a bitch. Let herd immunity take over was Atlas's idea, which would only cost maybe 8 or 10 million people their lives in this country. Jesus. And in an email to the Washington Post early this morning, when Atlas knew he was going to be mentioned in this piece, he said that any data he passed on to Trump was, quote, directly from CDC, the Department of Health and Human Services, and ongoing scientific literature, end quote. And he maintained that, quote, listening to additional scientists outside the administration is the way to arrive at the best policies, end quote. Oh, you fucking liar. You have been a liar I don't know how long. I've never heard of you. As the Post points out, anecdotes like those from Birx could be a preview of some of the disclosures still to come from other former Trump officials whose job was to fight a pandemic that has now killed more than 418,000 people in the United States. I mean, how does one assess how many of those deaths are directly attributable to Trump and this coterie of bastards and slime and punks and thugs that he had working for him? How do you do that? The New York Times yesterday published an interview with Anthony Fauci. And in that interview, he noted that he and his family had begun facing harassment and death threats as early as last March because he was trying to speak the truth and it didn't correspond with the filth and the lies that poured out of the Trump bastard's mouth. And that's the thing about Trump. He has all these brown shirts out there who will jump up out of the bushes and threaten to kill someone. Death threats. You fucking little cowards. You slimy little cowards, you. But in order to side with Trump, you have got to be a pissant, a coward, a nothing, realizing that your life isn't worth the powder to blow it to hell. Fauci said, quote, "One day I got a letter in the mail. I opened it up and a puff of powder came out all over my face and my chest. That was very, very disturbing," end quote. Jesus. And when that happened, a security detail around Fauci sprayed his office to get rid of the powder. They end up being what was described as, quote, "a benign nothing." But Fauci, who's 80 years old, seemed to suggest that whatever was inside could easily have killed him. Of course it could have, if that would have been ricin or some kind of a poison, a powdery white poison. In fact, he said, if it was ricin, I was dead. And it should be noted that on several occasions, envelopes containing ricin, that deadly power, were intercepted before reaching certain dissident voices within the Trump organization of filth. Anyway, as the Post goes on to say that as the pandemic shut the country down last March, Fauci and Birx became the faces of the government response. And if you remember, they appeared in those asinine, half-witted early daily news conferences alongside the orange bastard and the uber Christian and that Surgeon General who looked like some kind of a some kind of a statue standing there. And Birx put her support behind the Trump bastards and for a time received praise from the bastard. But the bastard criticized Fauci from the get-go because Fauci had the temerity to contradict the orange bastard's determination to play down the growing death toll and to continue to stand in the way of processes and techniques that would have slowed the death toll. Trump never led in the fight against the coronavirus. He promoted more death. He promoted sickness and disease. And in that interview with the New York Times, Fauci noted that while he remained in his day job, which was leading the Allergy and Infectious Diseases Institute, he said, quote, "Birx had to live with this person in the White House every day." This person being the orange asshole. Fauci added, "So it was much more of a painful situation for her," end quote. All the more reason for her to have spoken up early on when she saw what was happening, when she saw the deception and the lies that Trump was putting out there that wound up costing 100,000, 150,000 people their lives. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.